Sauron didn't start as the Dark Lord, you know. For centuries, he walked among the elves as a friend, teaching them, guiding them, helping them create their greatest works. And they loved him for it. By the time they realized who he truly was, he had already won. This is the story of how Sauron nearly conquered Middle-earth forever, and why it took the entire world rising against him to stop it. What happened in the Second Age makes everything in The Lord of the Rings possible, and it's far darker than the movies ever showed you. The Second Age begins with Sauron in hiding. His master Morgoth has just been defeated by the Valar in the War of Wrath, a conflict so catastrophic it broke the world and sank entire continents beneath the sea. Rather than face judgment in Valinor, Sauron flees into the wild lands of Middle-earth. For centuries, he does nothing. He watches, he waits. And around the year 1000 of the Second Age, he realizes something crucial. The Valar have abandoned Middle-earth. They've turned their attention away. They're not watching anymore. So Sauron decides to finish what Morgoth started. He doesn't begin with armies or fortresses. He begins with the peoples his master had already corrupted, men in the east and south who still remembered Morgoth's dark promises. They turn to Sauron willingly, eagerly. But Sauron knows that men alone aren't enough. There's a new power rising in Middle-earth, Numenor. An island kingdom of men descended from those who fought against Morgoth, blessed with long life, great wisdom, and the favor of the Valar themselves. 18 years earlier, the elf lord Gil-galad had warned them of a shadow growing in the east. That shadow is Sauron. He needs a stronghold, somewhere the Númenóreans can't easily reach. So he chooses Mordor, a land surrounded by mountains, defensible, dark. And there, he begins building Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower. It will take him 600 years to complete it. After 200 years of gathering strength, Sauron makes his move. But this isn't the brute force approach Morgoth used. Sauron is subtler, smarter. He knows that men are easy to corrupt, but the elves are the real threat. They're immortal, powerful, and they remember the First Age. They know what evil looks like. So Sauron does something brilliant. He takes on a fair form. He makes himself beautiful. And he calls himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He goes to Eregion, where the greatest elven smiths dwell, led by Celebrimbor, the grandson of Feanor himself. And Sauron teaches them. He shares his knowledge. He helps them reach heights of craft they never dreamed possible. Together, they become second only to Feanor in the history of elven smithing. But not everyone trusts him. In Lindon, Gil-galad and Elrond refuse to treat with Annatar. They don't know who he is, but something about him feels wrong. They warn Celebrimbor. He doesn't listen. For 90 years, Sauron and Celebrimbor work together, forging the Rings of Power. 7 for the Dwarf Lords, 9 for mortal men, and 3, the most powerful, for the elves themselves. Then, in the year 1600, Sauron returns to Mordor, and in secret, in the fires of Mount Doom, he forges the One Ring. He pours most of his own power into it, a desperate gamble to control all the other rings through the power of his own. The moment Sauron puts on the One Ring for the first time, the elves know. They feel it. Celebrimbor, wearing one of the 3, suddenly understands everything. The friend who taught him, who worked beside him for decades, it was Sauron. It was always Sauron, and the rings were a trap. Celebrimbor tears off his ring. He sends the 3 away, Nenya to Galadriel in Lothlorien, Vilya and Narya to Gil-galad, and Círdan in Lindon. He prepares for war, because Sauron's plan has failed. The 3 elven rings, made by Celebrimbor alone without Sauron's direct touch, Don't ensnare their bearers. The elves remain free. In 1695, Sauron invades Eriador with overwhelming force. He demands the surrender of all the rings of power. The elves refuse. And so begins the War of Elves and Sauron, a conflict that will devastate entire regions and nearly exterminate the elves of Middle-earth. For 2 years, the war rages. In 1697, Sauron wins. He sacks Eregion. He captures Celebrimbor. And then he tortures him. Celebrimbor breaks under the torment. He reveals where the 7 and the 9 are hidden. But he will not, cannot, tell Sauron where the 3 have gone. So Sauron kills him. His body is pierced with arrows and placed on a pike, used as a banner as Sauron's armies continue their assault. Eregion is destroyed. The elven smiths are dead. Elrond flees north with survivors, founding Rivendell as a refuge. By 1699, all of Eriador has fallen to Sauron's forces. His victory seems complete. But then the ships arrive. The Númenóreans have heard the elves' call for aid. And when they come with overwhelming force. A fleet lands at Lindon, and the combined armies of elves and men drive Sauron's forces back, crushing them so thoroughly that Sauron barely escapes to Mordor with a handful of orcs. But Sauron isn't defeated. Not really. He still has the 9. He still has the 7. And over the next centuries, he expands his empire, dominating civilizations in the far south and east, turning them into servants and worshippers. He builds temples for the worship of Morgoth. Human sacrifice becomes common practice. And then he gives out the rings. The dwarves, created by Aule to be resistant to domination, cannot be enslaved by the 7. The rings make them greedy, obsessive, but not obedient. The men, however, the men are taken completely. By the year 2251, all 9 bearers of the 9 have become the Nazgûl, wraiths, slaves to Sauron's will forever. The Númenóreans are outraged. This being, this Sauron, claims to be Lord of the Earth and King of men. So they come to Middle-earth with such force that Sauron's armies flee without fighting. And this is where Sauron does something extraordinary. He surrenders. In 3262, he allows himself to be taken prisoner to Númenor. Because he knows something the Númenóreans don't. He doesn't need armies to destroy them. He just needs to talk. In 3 years, Sauron becomes the advisor to King Ar-Pharazôn. In 3 years, he converts a nation that once opposed Morgoth into worshippers of Morgoth. He promises them immortality. He plays on their fear of death. He builds a 500-foot temple where they practice human sacrifice. They cut down Nimloth, the white tree, and burn it as an offering to the darkness. And then, in his greatest manipulation, Sauron convinces the king to do the unthinkable, make war on the Valar themselves, sail to the Undying Lands, take immortality by force. In 3319, the Númenórean fleet lands on the shores of Aman, and Eru Ilúvatar, God himself, intervenes. He reshapes the world from flat to round. He drowns Númenor beneath the sea. He destroys the Númenórean forces, and he makes it forever impossible for mortals to sail to the Undying Lands. Sauron's body is destroyed in the cataclysm. His spirit survives, bound to the One Ring, but he can never again take a fair form. When he returns to Middle-earth, he is diminished, twisted, but he still has the ring, and he still has his hatred. The surviving faithful Númenóreans, led by Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion, establish Gondor and Arnor in Middle-earth. And 110 years after the fall of Númenor, Sauron attacks. He considers them his bitter enemies, survivors of the kingdom he destroyed. He takes Minas Ithil, which will become Minas Morgul. In response to Sauron's aggression, the last alliance is formed. Elves and men unite one final time. Gil-galad and Elendil meet at Amon-Sul. They gather at Rivendell, spending 3 years forging weapons and making plans. Meanwhile, Anarion holds out in Gondor, defending Osgiliath and Minas Anor from Sauron's relentless assaults. The alliance crosses the Misty Mountains and marches south. Thranduil and his father Orifer bring elves from Greenwood. Galadriel sends forces from Lothlorien. Dwarves from Khazad-dûm join the host. In 3434, they meet Sauron's armies at the Battle of Dagorlad, the battle whose remnants Frodo and Sam will see in the Dead Marshes thousands of years later. Orifer is killed in the fighting, but the Alliance wins. They drive Sauron's forces back to Mordor. For 7 years, they besiege Barad-dûr. Anarion is killed in year 6. The Alliance is bleeding, losing, but they hold. Finally, in 3441, Sauron himself comes forth from his fortress. Gil-galad and Elendil face him. Both are killed. But together, they cast Sauron down. Isildur takes his father's broken sword, Narsil, and cuts the ring from Sauron's hand. The Second Age ends with Sauron defeated, his body destroyed, his power broken. But the ring survives, and so does he. This is the history that makes the Lord of the Rings possible. Without the last alliance, there would be no Gondor for Aragorn to reclaim. Without Isildur's failure to destroy the ring, there would be no quest for Frodo to undertake. The Second Age is the foundation on which everything else is built. And it shows us something crucial. Sauron didn't win through strength alone. He won through deception, through manipulation, through turning people's best intentions against them. The rings of power were created with good intentions. Numenor fell because they feared death. Every victory Sauron achieved came from corrupting something good. That's the real lesson of the Second Age. Evil doesn't just attack, it corrupts. And the battle against it never truly ends.